A few weeks ago, I released a video in which I critiqued 10 renderings. These were your images submitted to me, and my goal was to tell you what I thought you did really well as where I thought you could improve the image. Now, because it was so well received, I'm back again today with episode number 2. We've got 10 more images I'm gonna review, and I'm gonna do my best to offer positive feedback as well as where I think the image could be improved. Same format as last time, hopefully a little bit more dialed this time. And before we dive in, I wanna say thank you to anyone who submitted renderings. It takes a lot of courage. Show some love in the comments for anyone who submitted their images that got reviewed today. And number 2, remember, I'm trying to be as helpful as I can with these. So I'm trying to be realistic and objective with my feedback, but my goal for you is to improve and to feel inspired to take another pass at that image and see what you can do to improve it. Without further ado, let's dive in. All right, let's kick it off with image number 1. We've got this wristwatch, and I like the way it's been positioned on the ground. It's a good layout. I like the tone or the overall, I guess, color composition. We've got this kind of warm, cool, light split. I think that's always a pretty safe thing to try out. And overall, it looks like the materials are fairly well handled. We've got a good attention to detail going on. And I think overall that the tones have been pushed pretty well. I think when you zoom out, it reads pretty well. It's obvious that it's a wristwatch on some sort of a textured background or floor. So it has a few things going for it, but I think that we can find some areas to improve upon. The first thing that jumps out to me is the face or the crystal or whatever this front part of the watch is called. I think it's too shiny and reflective here. That makes it hard to see the design and the brand of the watch behind the glass. And unfortunately, that's not what we want to see. We want to see the design of the object, and the reflectivity of the glass is obscuring that. This is an easy fix. You can either reduce the index of refraction of the glass material. Alternatively, it looks like the floor here is quite shiny. It's got a high specular value. You could reduce that as well. Another thing that's not helping is that there's a pretty aggressive texture on the ground, which then reflects in the face of the watch, making it even more difficult to see what's happening behind that glass. So a few recommendations. First of all, make that glass less reflective. I would reconsider the ground. I don't love this texture. It's like, I don't know if it wants to be brick or if it wants to be wood. Also, if this is a wristwatch, this is a really small texture. It seems a little bit kind of out of place. Also, for the roughness map on it, it looks a little soft and splotchy. I would maybe reuse the actual texture that's being used as a bump map or displacement in here for the roughness as well. That would match at least better in my opinion. Another thing, I want to point out an opportunity. Fuzz, I like the attention to detail and the fuzz is pretty well executed, but I think it makes the watch look like it would be very itchy and uncomfortable to wear. I would reconsider the material that's being used on this wristwatch. I just think you could come up with a better material for the wristband. And then the other thing I'll do is just suggest maybe a little more contrast. You know, I like to turn off the saturation as well sometimes and see, like this actually looks like a pretty nice image when converted to black and white. The watch is actually blending in a little bit here with the background, you know, maybe a little more contrast there. But generally speaking, I like to do the black and white test to see if we're relying too much on the color or the hue to create contrast, when in fact, it can be sometimes more effective to focus on the value to create contrast. So notice inside the band, it's really dark there, then it's really dark down here. But then we have some nice bright high contrast areas here, which create a nice balance compositionally and as far as with our light. So just something to think of. I think this image could be pushed a little bit, a little more contrast. The last thing I want to point out, I'm noticing here, it looks like we've got some weird issues where the light is reflecting in the opposite direction than it should be on the edge of the watch. This is almost always caused by reversed normals. The polygons or triangles within this model are reflecting light in the opposite direction. Those normals need to be flipped around. And depending on what program you're using, that's done differently. But generally speaking, I think that would help quite a bit. Finally, maybe a little depth of field, and I don't think we need all this background back here. This to me is kind of wasted space. I would consider a different crop or composition maybe. Overall though, I think it's a good starting point, and I don't think you would have to put very much work in to make it quite a bit better. So hopefully that's helpful. Let's move on to image number 2. So if you want to take the most direct path to learning KeyShot, then check out my KeyShot Rendering Masterclass. It's already helped hundreds of others level up, including designers from Nike, Dell, Logitech, Sonos, Garmin, Trek, Pepsi, and lots of others. See, I designed the KeyShot Rendering Masterclass to be the most comprehensive course available while still making it super easy to understand. And what makes it different is the unique combination of bite-sized, feature-based videos coupled with follow-along, project-based lessons. This course will help you build an intuitive understanding of how KeyShot works. Then you'll be able to create and explore within KeyShot without getting bogged down by the technical aspects of the software. My goal is to help you convert your ideas to digital images. When you enroll, you'll get access to over 100 video lessons, quizzes, an active comments section, private Discord server channel, and project files to maximize your learning. So check out the link in the description below to learn more. I hope to see you there. All right, here we are with image number 2. So this person who submitted this said that they have a perfume bottle they designed that they want to be the hero of the shot. Okay, so I'm gonna have to assume it's this bottle here that is gonna be the hero of the shot that they designed. I like a couple things about this image. I like the ambition of bringing in another material for a backdrop. We've got plants, we've got furniture. It's more of a whole scene instead of just one object floating in space. So you're adding some context and you're trying to create a bit of a vibe, a bit of a feel to the image, and that's good. I also like that you went ahead and you've enabled caustics. So we've got the light that's coming through the glass and everything with a little color in it. Unfortunately, I can see you have caustics on because of these splotches, these little white patterns. That happens in KeyShot, unfortunately, if you don't let it render long enough. And I think overall, you tried to get creative and push the color, so you kind of played with the art direction a bit. So I appreciate the ambition. Let's talk about what we could do to improve this image. Now, the first thing that jumps out to me is hierarchy. So what I mean by that is when I zoom out, the first thing that my eye sees is the big table, the plants, and the pink wall. I don't really see the perfume bottle. Because you have 3 instead of 1, it actually makes the one that you want to be the hero even more difficult to pay attention to. So I think generally speaking, you gotta consider what you need to show in the image for it to make sense. And for me, I think we could do a composition where it's just the stuff you see with inside the yellow box, and it would be plenty. The other thing is, if you want this bottle to be the hero, it's gotta be closer to the camera, it's gotta be bigger in frame. You can do this by, we could lower the camera down a little bit so it's a lower angle, so we're not looking down on top of it as much. We wanna look more straight at the bottle. And then you can push these other ones, if you want, further away, and that will put more emphasis on this bottle design, not the others. When it comes to the textures on the wall and the plants and the marble, I think something looks off. They all just look way too artificial. This could be because you're using lower resolution textures. It could be because you've scaled them incorrectly. Something about them just doesn't read as realistic, so it's very distracting. If you can't get a texture to look realistic, sometimes I recommend going with just a simpler backdrop, and that can be more effective. One thing you could do to really help put the emphasis on this and to hide the fact that maybe your textures aren't super high resolution is you can use depth of field. If you had a composition where we're a little bit closer to our perfume bottle and you push these other ones back, by turning on some depth of field, it will blur everything that's further away from the object that's in focus, which would be your perfume bottle. And that way we see the stuff in the background and we understand the vibe that you're going for, but we don't pick up on the textures and what shortcomings they might have. I see this as an interesting starting point, but I think you gotta push it in a few areas. And I think starting off with just the composition and resolving some of the hierarchy issues, so we see this as the hero, and then also de-emphasizing some of these other textures by using some depth of field, I think would help you quite a bit. Let's move on to image number 3. So image number 3 is a skateboard rack. So the designer created these structures that get 3D printed so you can mount your skateboard on the wall. So what do I like about this image? I think overall, if we zoom out, it does really, really well when it comes to read. I think it's got a good amount of dynamic range, which means we've got some nice bright areas, but we also have some nice dark shadows. They could maybe be pushed just a little bit more so on the dark range, I think. Also, I think that I like the way you've used light to describe the form here. This honeycomb form is really, really nice. And I like the fact that you have the light coming through it, and that gives it some really good depth, and that really shows off your design very well. And I think overall compositionally, I think that the kind of angle that leads our eye in is decent, but we also have some areas to improve on. First and foremost, I think I would crop in. I don't think we need quite so much above and below this image. The next major thing I'd point out is the HDRI that you're using to light this scene is visible behind this wall. I think that is doing you a big disservice because it's obvious that it's an HDRI because these straight lines are not straight. You can tell this is a spherically mapped image, which is looking really weird, and it's low resolution and it creates this jagged aliasing pattern which just doesn't look right. So rather than using an HDRI here or making it visible, I would have at least maybe put in a backplate, in which case the backplate will be visible, but the light from the HDRI will still shine through it. Or you could have extended this brick wall over here, and then cropped your image so we don't have this background here. I think something else has to be done with that because I think using the low resolution HDRI is not helping you at all. What else can we do here? I think that, again, I really like the light coming through this honeycomb. I actually would like to have seen you play with the positioning in the direction of the light so that we get that same light coming through the honeycomb on the one that's closest to the camera. I think that generally speaking, you want to try to put more of the highlights closer on the parts that are closer to the camera. In this case, we're kind of backlit. So more of the light and contrast is back here, which puts our eye back here. And that just creates an uncomfortable situation where the stuff closest to us is actually harder to see because it's lacking contrast and it's a little bit dark. If I were to talk about the skateboard a little bit, I think that it looks kind of fake. The bottom side, the graphics are just too shiny overall. I think they look too plasticky. I think you want to tone that down a little bit and then see if you can't look at or reference some skateboard textures because the way the plies on a skateboard go should kind of follow this curve and it looks like they're doing something else kind of funky in here. Those would be my big suggestions here. I think that this could show off your product a little bit better. I personally would wonder about bringing in some light maybe from here or this direction, but that's just me. All right, so hopefully that's helpful for feedback on this image. Let's move on to image number 4. So image number 4 appears to be a Bluetooth wireless headset or headphones, something like that. And it looks really nice. Like, I don't have a lot of negative stuff to say about this image. Well done. You've taken a little bit more of a sophisticated lighting setup. Even though the background is super simple, I think that this has a very professional feeling to it. Also, you've done a good job of using light to describe the image or the shape, the form of these products. I think that's well done there too. And you haven't gone crazy with the lighting. You haven't overly lit it. What that means is we have some nice dark contrasty areas here as well, which creates some nice balance. What would I recommend we do to improve this image? And the first thing that stands out to me, if I zoom out, it does read okay, but I think we could go a little further by boosting the brightness and contrast. So I'll go ahead and toggle that on and off. I think it's a little bit dark and I think you could push it a little bit more and you could push the contrast too a little bit more. I think another big thing you could do is this is a pretty close crop image, which means I don't actually see the entire product, whether it's the one in the back or the one in the front. I actually don't know the full overall form of this object. I would almost consider maybe taking the one in the back and maybe pushing it to the right a little bit and maybe push this one to the left just a touch. I'm not saying so they're not overlapping at all, but I'm curious to see if I could understand the overall form of the product a little bit better by creating some space between them. Also, I really like what you did with the depth of field. The one in the back's nice and blurry. That creates a nice hierarchy. So we're looking at this guy up front. And you've done a fantastic job with this little light strip, this little local LED. These can be a little bit tricky to figure out, especially when you're trying to get them to shine through a plastic material like this, so well done. Yeah, I don't have a lot negative to say, but I think basically you could boost the overall brightness and contrast of this image, maybe create a little more space between these two so we can see the form just a little bit better. And I think that's pretty much it. I think compositionally it's great. I think your overall, use of tone and texture and everything's really nice. Yeah, I like the image. Good job. One thing maybe, I will say it's a little bit grainy for my liking. So maybe letting it render a little longer, or if you added noise, maybe back off on that a little bit so it's just a little bit smoother. Overall, I really like it. Well done. Time to move on to image number 5. We've got an interior. I always feel like an imposter when I talk about an interior because I struggle with interiors. I think they're really difficult. And I've not spent a lot of time getting good at them myself, so it's hard for me to know where to improve it. But we're gonna do our best. Overall, I really like this image. I think this person's done a fantastic job when it comes to legibility. So when I zoom out, it's very clear that it's an interior. We could see what happens when you boost the contrast and the brightness. Yeah, maybe it helps a little bit. But when I zoom in, it may be a little bit too distracting when you go that bright. Maybe you could go a little bit, but somewhere in between. But I think this person's done a great job creating some nice dark values, some light values. Compositionally, it's quite nice too. I don't have anything negative to say. I really like how our eye is, like it's not overly flat. We've got this line coming back here. We've got this line coming back here. Kind of directs us to the corner. We've got just a bunch of natural light coming in here, which is really relaxing and cool. You've got this super neat light fixture, which looks very nice, by the way. Well handled. Yeah, that adds a lot. And then of course, I think, subject matter within the rendering is this chair. I mean, this is a really strong image as well. So this is difficult. So with interiors, when you have a lot of light coming in from a window, most people will leave the image outside the window way too dark and colorful, when in fact, if you take a photograph of an interior, when your camera exposes for all the stuff inside, everything out the window gets blown out, kind of like this. And you don't typically see any of the detail out there. Now, this person's done a really good job of handling that, meaning they've avoided showing tons of colorful detail outside the window. Maybe they could wash it out just a little bit more. Also, the horizon line is a little odd. I think I would kind of expect, in order to see all this stuff out here, I feel like this house would have to be up high, kind of at an angle looking down. I almost wonder if that's off. But then again, maybe that's just my fault. Maybe that's just me. Now, as far as the ground textures, that's cool. I think it's a little high contrasty. It looks a little too smooth and rough. I feel like I'd tone down that a little bit so it's a little bit more uniform. I do think that you want that contrast in the texture on the ground, but I think maybe you could tone it down just a little bit. And then for me, I think the only other opportunities that come to mind, I think you've done great with color. This is kind of a greenish blue, cool, sort of a nice, interesting color scheme. I almost wonder if we've got a little too much negative space down here on bottom, and maybe we could crop in a little more on top. I don't know. Otherwise, it's hard for me to criticize. I think this orange juice is decent, but it looks maybe just a little bit off, and that could be due to color grading or something like that. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe an opportunity for me is some storytelling. Could we have a humanistic element? I know we have the orange juice in there, but do we have something here? Do we put something on the chair? Do we leave something here that just helps tell a story? I don't really know, but to me it feels like there's something else that needs to be in here to make it a little bit more interesting. I think technically speaking, this person did a great job executing an image and making it look nice and professional once again. To make it really great, I think something unexpected or surprising or interesting from a storytelling or a narrative standpoint could go a long ways. I don't know what that is, but that's what I would challenge this person to do next. So good job with that one. Sweet, so our next image, we've got this, it looks like a cosmetic type personal product. We've got a face scrub, orange and mint extract. Sounds fresh. Okay, so this is totally the type of image you'd see, like a nice marketing image for a product. I see images like this on Pinterest a lot. They're really nice. They kind of provide some context as to what is maybe inside this product. We've got all this orange and mint, really well done. These are nice assets wherever they got these. They look nice and realistic. And then you've got a little bit of abstract, these little orange metallic balls as well, looks nice too. Good job on making it look, again, this is very professional feeling. I feel like this is kind of more like agency style work. Nice job. It's got an awesome composition if you ask me. I really like how we've created some order and patterns going on, but it's not perfect. It's not like you just took a cloner and said, make a perfect circle of these objects. So I think you've done a good job there. It looks like a balanced composition, I guess is what I'm saying. Also, pretty good contrast overall in color schemes. I will say, of course it reads okay when we zoom out, but a couple things jump out to me as far as opportunities. Number one, a black tube like this, it looks too flat if you ask me. In fact, I actually barely can see this part line and no texture whatsoever. So if it's just a smooth matte texture, that's fine. However, I think we need to see that a little better because everything around it is so bright and vibrant. By contrast, the black just looks like a black hole. So we need to have some way to get that black object to read a little bit better. Now, if I turn up the brightness and saturation, this thing really jumps off the page. Now, I'm not saying that you have to go this bright and saturated. I think the saturation is a little bit strong. Sorry, this is just brightness and contrast. I'm sorry. If we take the hue and saturation down a little bit, just a little bit, and then we have our brightness and our contrast boosted like we do here, to me, that reads a lot better than this. This looks very muted by contrast. Just something to think about. I think for me, if we're selling this tube, this product, it needs to read really well and then everything else around it. Whereas I think you've done a pretty good job with everything else around it, and the tube itself needs a little bit of attention. I'm not sure what your lighting setup was here, but again, just some overall contrast I think would go a long way. Brighter brights, darker darks, and then maybe the actual black color on this tube could be a little bit brighter, and then of course make it more reflective, something like that. I think that's all I have on this one. It's a pretty straightforward image. Not a lot I would change, just needs to be massaged a little bit. Let's move on to our next image. So this next image is interesting. It kind of has an abstract feel to it, but I'm not sure that's helping us 100% because when I see it, my biggest question is, what is it? Why don't I know what it is? And what should I look at within the image? I mean, obviously my eye is drawn to this white vase thing. Maybe it's a teapot, I don't quite know. They're gorgeous reflections. I really like the blue and the red kind of split tone. These are very realistic looking light fixtures reflecting in here. It's warm and comforting, which is really cool, but I just don't know what it is. And that bothers me. So if I zoom out, a few things jump out to me from a composition standpoint. I think this needs some better art direction or some consideration around what's happening outside the product. Context, as we like to call it. So the first thing I notice is this is dangerously close to the edge. That creates a really uncomfortable feeling considering how much room we have to the right side of the object. So first of all, I would create a little bit more space here, maybe a little less space here. The next thing I would consider is our background and this platform that it's sitting on, whatever it is. They're almost the same and therefore they blend together, especially with your depth of field. And when I zoom out, I don't know what's going on there. And then by contrast, we have this bright area here and down below. So by the time I zoom out, this just is reduced to this abstract collection of flat objects. We've got this big square here, we've got a square here, we've got this dark background, and then this white circular or spherical object. So for me, I think you got to consider getting further away from your image in order to read it a little bit better. The next thing is, what could you add to this scene to explain to someone like me who doesn't understand the product what I'm looking at, you know? Is there steam coming out of here? Is it a teapot? Is it a diffuser? If it's something else, do I need to see a handle somewhere? Is there a prop next to it? Something that would indicate what it is? Or maybe the setting, maybe the background could explain what's going on with this image. I just don't know. I don't know. I like what you've done. These reflections are really nice. And I like the two-tone kind of warm, cool split, but I just don't know enough about this image. We just need a little more context. I think this looks a little abstract. That's my feedback on this one here. Let's move on to the next image, which looks awesome, gotta say. Fantastic work here. We've got a LaCroix branded, looks like cider, alcoholic cider. So this is a really nice image. Again, this falls pretty in line with the professional look of some of the others we've seen today. It's got this kind of bright, colorful advertisement feel. It's playful, but it's well composed. I really, really like the execution, technically speaking. This is a really well done piece. We've got water droplets, literally water droplets, physically modeled on the surface. Really well done. And the refraction looks correct on them. Really nice. You've got this can material that has a nice soft touch matte feel, but also some metallic shinier areas, which just looks so good, so good. I can really I feel like I could touch the texture on this can. You've done a great job. Graphics are beautiful. Really, really good contrast here. There's a lot to like about this image. Fluid, liquid, whatever you want to call it, that's not easy to do. Looking at this image, where would we start if we wanted to push it? We zoom out, does it read well? Yes, it absolutely does. Would it benefit from some brightness and contrast? Let's get back in here and pull the brightness back down. I don't think this image needs any more brightness. Contrast though, it depends on your final output. I don't think every image needs to be super contrasty, but in this case, it might help just a little touch more vibrant and maybe a slighter darker background. So we've got all this fruit. Again, this is kind of a trendy type thing. We've got these apples and these, they look like little leaves, I guess. I'm not sure that the leaves really match. I guess the green from the leaves is nice, and it kind of mimics the label, which is cool. I'd wonder if we could get some fruit slices, because it looks like you have some, I'd find more elements that were incorporated in this label and bring them into the background here. Maybe just one other fruit or a different shaped leaf. The other thing is it's a style where it shows a lot of motion. It's almost like a freeze frame. You know, you can imagine this fruit swirling around, water swirling around, and you got the still shot. Typically speaking, you would have some motion blur going on somewhere. I know it's frozen to be a stylized image, but I wonder if we could add a little bit more motion blur to some of these other elements in the background. Maybe, maybe not, I'm not sure. The other big thing for me is this liquid fluid sim or whatever. I think I read that the person who submitted this did that in Houdini, so props to you, because that's not easy to do. It's looking a little too rigid for me, and I don't know why. I feel like it looks a little too viscous, like it's a little too sticky, like maybe it's too thick. Maybe reducing the IOR a little bit would help, or I don't know what it needs, but it just feels too solid for it to be a liquid kind of doing that. But again, this is very much my opinion, you know, so I'm not saying technically speaking it's wrong, because it's a nice looking, really nice looking image. I'm just trying to think what I would do to boost it. I think your composition's fantastic. I think your lighting's very good. The label reads really well. Technically, it's well executed. I don't have a lot of criticism. I think I would just maybe go for a little more contrast and in the background and darken that a little bit so it kind of jumps off the page just a little bit more. Otherwise, I think you've done a bang-up job. Really, really nice. Really nice. Let's move on to the next image. And this one is, in my opinion, drop dead gorgeous. This is a super nice shot. I chose some hard ones, you guys. I really didn't realize that I was choosing such hard images to critique when I started this one. Oh my, okay, so what do I like about this image? First of all, I think this thing is awesome when it comes to use of light and shadow. I think so many images, we overlight our products. There's just light coming from every angle, and it's like if you accent everything, you kind of accent nothing. And in this case, this person is obviously showing off this candle. It's like one of those fireplaces, but you put your candle in it, you know, and it's probably got an oil diffuser, so you got the steam or smoke coming up. Really, really nicely done. There's no question as to what we're supposed to focus on. Visually speaking, the hierarchy is definitely on the right object. And then we have this lovely checkerboard scenario going where we have dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, light, dark, light. You see what they're doing there? They have all these pockets of light and dark right next to each other that really breaks up the image and creates some nice strong graphical elements. We've got some caustics going on in here, really beautiful caustics, well done on that. You know, these 3D assets, not sure where they came from, but they look really nice too, very detailed. And this cloth, this fabric is great. I mean, technically well executed, really well done. I'm not sure I have much to criticize. They said they wanted it to be a cozy atmosphere. It's got this kind of warm feel to it. Maybe I would try to introduce another light source where there's like a bit of a warm glow on the wall back here, behind here somewhere, just so it's not quite so dark. And that would help kind of punch up some of these other darker elements. Maybe you could bring in some atmosphere. It looks like we have our light sources coming in this direction, right? So I almost wonder if you could do like a light leak, or not like a lens flare that looks cheesy, but just, you know, when you have a light source here, it just kind of bleeds into the side of the frame. Could we do that so we get a better understanding of the light coming in here? That's just a bit of a soft burst of light coming in. Maybe that would help. That's about all I've got. I'm really sorry. I'd be curious if anyone in the comments, you know, if you have suggestions. Maybe the one thing else here that's maybe a little bothering me is this white ceramic element here. It's actually brighter and more reflective than this guy here. So it is a bit distracting. If I zoom out, this little guy is distracting me a bit too much. Could it be a different color? Could it maybe be a pop of color that brings some playfulness into this kind of a somber feeling? Like, I know it's supposed to be cozy, but it feels kind of serious if you ask me. There's a lot of brown. Like, could we have a fun splash of color on this that doesn't feel too out of place? Maybe that would just compete with our for our attention with the rest of it. I'm not entirely sure. I wanted to show this image just because it's awesome and well done. One last thing, maybe I found something to nitpick finally. I'm not sure what's going on with this shadow. It looks incorrect. It looks too sharp because we have this nice pitted texture here, but it for whatever reason, we get this kind of really harsh shadow here that I'm not sure makes a lot of sense to me. But man, yeah, overall well done. That one shadow, maybe I'd work on that, but fantastic job on this one. Thanks for sharing it. I don't know, I'm inspired by this one. This one's really cool, so good job. Time to move on to our last image. Here we go. We have an alarm clock concept. So the person who submitted this designed and rendered this alarm clock. And they said that they wanted it in a really different environment to kind of push their technical skills. A couple things I like about it. I like the kind of whimsical feel. It is a bit odd. Like, I don't know if this is supposed to look like fur or like a soft blanket. I think it almost should probably look like a synthetic blanket, I imagine. But it's definitely soft and fuzzy, more or less. We've got this kind of bluish cool and then this kind of warmish yellow feeling there. I also like your attention to detail with our materials. This clock is very, very smudgy. Someone has hit that snooze button like a bunch of times. You can tell we've got some lots of kind of grime on it, and that's okay. I think it helps give it that feel of being used, which is cool. Compositionally too, I think it's okay. Maybe we can push it a little bit. What do I see as far as room for improvement goes? The big thing that jumps out to me is I'm not sure about this. Is this your personal logo? Is it supposed to be like branding, like as if this was a product advertisement? If that was the case, this is confusing. It feels very disconnected. What really makes it awkward is I don't know if it's supposed to be like a 3D element within the scene, because it doesn't look like if it's a graphical element, I would expect it to be kind of like, you know, squared off. But in this case, it looks like it's like a 3D hologram kind of floating. It's very odd, very distracting. And since I don't recognize the logo, I don't know what to think of it. I would remove that if you don't need it there. Compositionally speaking, I think that we're getting a little close to the edge there, a little bit close. I'd create a little more breathing room than that, personally speaking. And then maybe you could cut back on some of the space you have behind the clock. I really do like the lighting in this scene, and it's different. The more I zoom out, yeah, you could add a little more contrast, but I don't think we need it. I really like the way you've got this warm light here and this cool light here. And what sells it for me is how the product itself has some little specular highlights, some edges here that are a little bit more reflective on the warm light, and some areas where there's some of that cool light reflecting there as well. Looks really, really quite nice. Now, I'm not sure I love the paper clip for, I read the submission said that was left in for scale. We all have interacted with alarm clocks. I don't think we need a paperclip for scale. Why would there be a paperclip on an alarm clock? I don't know, but to me it feels very out of place. I would omit that. And then texture-wise too, I know this has some grime on it, but it looks a little bit heavy, especially the fact that this like volume knob is kind of like scratched or smudged out. I think you could go a little easier on that. Lastly, I think with these digital displays, they can be a little tricky. This looks a little bit flat. Usually these have like a little bit of a hot spot where they get really bright toward the middle and then they kind of fade out toward the edge. And that can make it look a lot more realistic. So I would have maybe considered trying to dial in that texture to make it look a little more glowy, if you know what I mean. Even though this is a very unexpected kind of a texture for this to be sitting on, I really do like it. And I really like that, and maybe I'm bringing a little bit too much into this, but to me, I see an alarm clock as this thing that makes me think of sleeping. On this side of the alarm clock, I think of like, this is before I go to sleep, this is where I'm at. And then back here almost seems like dreamland, like I've gone to sleep and these little furs almost make me think of like a meadow or like a forest or something, like a dreamscape. So to me, I actually, you know, again, maybe I'm bringing too much of my own opinion and narrative into this, but I really like the color, and I like that, to me, there feels like there's a little bit of storytelling here. But my biggest criticisms would be to take care of whatever that is. I don't think the paperclip needs to be there. And maybe there's another one or two things you could add to the scene to help convey that storytelling, make it a little more obvious if that indeed was something you wanted to do. And then lastly, compositionally, I think we could use some breathing room toward the bottom lower corner. Hopefully that was helpful. Holy smokes. Okay, that was a lot harder than I expected. You guys gave some really good images to critique this time. I hope I was able to at least find some areas or give you ideas of ways you could push the image or improve your own images. If your image was one that I critiqued, thank you very much, and please share this video on Instagram or whatever social network you're on and tag me. I love interacting with all of you, and again, thank you for being part of this video. All right, guys, until next time, you know what to do. Happy rendering.